that didn't work for me. Because then he started love bombing pretty hard, and I actually canceled the divorce. Like, I actually was like, no, we're not gonna get divorced. We're gonna work on it. No judgment. It typically takes people 7 times trying to leave. That was my first hard, like, I'm done.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Thrive Over Survive. I'm so excited to have a fellow survivor here with me today. Megan actually has her own podcast called Flow Rising, which focuses on the entrepreneurial journey through the lens of a domestic violence survivor. With insights from her guests and her own experience as a survivor, her new podcast is filled with stories of passion, purpose, and power. She finds joy in being open, honest, and vulnerable with her healing journey and sharing her mission with the world. And I say new podcast because you had a switch from, you had an old podcast. Now this
Yep.
is your second podcast. So you're a very experienced podcast guest host. I just wanted to specify for anyone watching.
Yep.
And I'm going to let Megan introduce herself and kind of talk about her journey, because she has a very interesting story and journey to share with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun for me to be on this end of the podcast because I do
Right?
the hosting. Yes, I do the hosting side a lot. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because my podcast also, we do I talk to domestic violence survivors as well. And so it's always funny for me when people are like, share your story. And I'm like, but I love everybody else's story. Yeah, but no, I
Right?
mean, my personal story, I mean, where I am in life is I'm 4 years out of, and we're gonna get airplanes. I'm sorry, I live near an airport, but uh,
You're
background noise.
enjoying the sun.
Um,
Don't
I
apologize.
am. It's beautiful here. So, I am 4 years out of an 18-year marriage. My marriage started, for reference, I always tell people I'm 42 now. My marriage started when I was 20. So I met my now ex when I was 20.
Yeah.
And it really was, we met in Colorado, and it was, I was looking for adventure and fun and excitement and something that was different, because at that time I had no idea that I'd grown up in an abusive household. That is all very new information as I started my healing journey now in life. That,
Yep.
at 20, there was almost no way I wasn't going to walk into something like I did. Yeah,
Yep.
so
Yep.
it was just one of those, he swept me off my feet, and it was lots of fun. And then I would say it was just a couple of months into the relationship. We were about 2 months into the relationship, and he's like, let's move to California. Okay. Okay. So strike one, move you away from the support system. I grew up in Colorado. Like, I didn't see it as
Yep.
that. Move you away from your
Yep.
support system. And then we were there for a few months. And this, again, for reference, we moved 5 days after 9/11. Not a great time to be relocating your
Oh,
life.
yeah. I didn't know
So,
that part.
no, and that's, it's just for a frame of reference. For those of us who were adults when it happened, that was, if you were even changing a job in the town you lived in, it was hard. People didn't trust each other. People didn't, like, we were all
Yeah.
scared and didn't know what was going on. So getting jobs was hard. Finding a place was hard. Like, those types of things, which should normally just be up, you go get a job, you get an apartment, you get established. That was difficult from
Yep.
the go. And shortly, I think we were just 6 or 7 weeks into living in California, when the first time that he started beating me. And I stayed for 18 years. And
Oh,
so,
well, it was
yeah.
also a very different time, I would say, because there wasn't as much social media. Like there is, it's just so much more talked about now. Still not
Yep.
enough, but
Nope.
you're not equipped with the knowledge. So for anyone watching, I just like
No.
to remind everyone, everyone goes on their own journey, and it does
Hmm.
take sometimes a lot to leave, and or it's hard to see it when you're in the weeds.
Yeah, and I tell people that all the time. I said, that one of the biggest questions I always get is, why did you stay for so long? And at
Hey,
first that question was really hard, because I was like, well, I don't
Makes you
know. I
feel
don't
guilty.
know. It did. And what I realized was, oh, I grew up with a narcissistic mother. I grew up with a narcissistic mother and a father who was her narcissistic fuel, who just took it out on me. He was getting abused from her, and he in turn did what she said, which was took it out on me. So I had two very emotionally immature parents who I, the only credit I'll give him is as a parent, we do the best we can with what we have at the time we have, and what they had
Yep.
sucked. They didn't
Right.
have anything to give as parents. And my mom was
Right.
a covert narcissist on top of it. And so from go, I mean, I was the middle of three children and I was the whipping child. There was, again, no way that I wasn't going to walk into one or multiple. Even if I hadn't stayed with him, I'd have just gone to the next one. I wasn't ready to move forward and go, oh, nope, I can change. I get to have a life of love and support and what I have now. I get to be in a different
Right.
space, but I couldn't see that at 20. I couldn't see it at 25 when I got married, or 28 when I had my son. I didn't see it till 38. And that's okay. Like I saw it when I saw it. And then I was like, okay,
Because that
it's time.
some people grow up with that. Like you said, you didn't know, like if that's all you knew growing up, that's gonna be how you expect to be treated in an adult relationship. You
It's
know?
we learn how adult relationships work from the what we see around us. And all I
Yeah.
saw around me was abusive relationships, emotionally abusive, physically abusive, mentally abusive, religiously abusive, like
Oh, yeah.
just all of those things that was the norm. I thought it was, what was expected. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that was just, and so staying for me, again, I've talked to on my podcast, I've talked to people who are like, no, I got in 3, 4, 5 relationships before I finally realized, oh, I'm not
Yep.
I'm not the problem, but what I'm attracting is not working for me.
Right. You're attracting that, or you're like, for me, I mean, I talk a lot about my abusive relationship, the one specifically, but there were plenty of relationships before that where they were maybe not physically abusive to the extent, but there was emotional, mental abuse and gaslighting and all that. And that's because that's what you attract, because you're not healed. You haven't started your own healing journey. So
Yeah.
I relate so much, and I think so many of our listeners can relate to what you're sharing, because
Mhm.
sometimes it's also not easy financially, like you mentioned, to leave someone, or you don't feel safe to leave. That's also hard. So I don't know if you can share a little bit with us, since you were so married for so long, how did you kind of come up with your escape plan? Because I think that's what a lot of women struggle with. And then
Yes.
staying away.
So, and then staying away. So,
Yeah.
one thing that I started leaning into. So I actually filed for divorce at the beginning of 2019 in a way that a lot of people do. Like I got an attorney, and I left town for a few days and had the service processor go and serve him. That didn't work for me. Because then he started love bombing pretty hard, and I actually canceled the divorce. Like I actually was like, no, we're not going to get divorced. We're going to work on it. No judgment. It typically takes people 7 times trying to leave. That was my first hard, like, I'm done. Then, sadly, I stayed for, it was August when I finally got him out. But in February of that year, so shortly after I'd filed for divorce in January, in February, 4 or 5 weeks later, the abuse just started over again.
Yeah.
And that was where I was like, I'm done. And so I actually, um, one thing that I really pride about myself is I'm a very, very intelligent human being who does my research. And I just got on, like I said, I live in Colorado now again. And I just got on and said, how do you get divorced? What does it take? Well, I was like, okay, so to get him gone, I have to make him think it's not over. So the first thing I did was I realized I own the home.
That's good advice.
So I had to treat him like a tenant, like he was my renter. So I said, here's the date you need to move out. We need a break. This isn't working. I gave him the impression that he was only going to be gone for 3 months. So the
Good
first step
idea.
was that separation. And I think any good plan, and let's just be clear. All plans are faulty. All plans are not perfect, but the best and most important thing is that you get out. Like, figure out how
Yeah.
to get yourself out or get them out. And I really did. I look back now and I'm like, I grew up with manipulators and they taught me how to manipulate them back. I used what I knew about him after all those years against him. That's really the best way to say, because I actually ended up successfully getting divorced in April of 2020. I refiled for divorce. He left in August of 2019, fairly peacefully. And then in January of 2020, I filed for divorce again. No attorneys. I got him to sign all of the papers. I got him to give me pretty much almost full custody. He had no interest in being a parent. He never did have
Yeah.
an interest, but he didn't want to lose custody. That's the thing about, because he's narcissistic as well. He didn't want to lose custody, but he
Yeah.
didn't really want to have custody. So I was like, really, it was just a conversation of, I'll take all the debt. You don't have to deal with that. I'll give you all your stuff. You don't have to deal with that. I will take on all the responsibility. You don't have to deal with that. We just need a break. And that's how I got him out. And once I got him out, I got him to sign the papers, filed for divorce. We actually had a fairly amicable divorce. I say that because he didn't fight me. That
Yeah.
was, so yeah, April 29th of 2020 over the phone, which was fantastic. I was like, I didn't even have to go to court because it was the middle of
Because
COVID.
that's
COVID had
nice.
just started. Um, and yeah, I was actually supposed to get divorced 2 days after shutdown. And I was panicked because
Mm,
that was when everything shut down and nobody knew if the court system was still going to
yeah.
work. They actually canceled my divorce. And I was like,
No. Yeah.
but then we ended up getting divorced over the phone. And it was great because I didn't have to see him or look at him, any of it. And the staying gone part, that was hard.
Yeah.
Um, because it was
Because
COVID
they,
and there was nobody else.
oh, that's a good point. Yeah. 'Cause I was thinking love bombing or like if because well, he didn't really
Nope.
fight you after that first
Nope.
one. But-
Nope. He
So
just gave up and he didn't love bomb after that. It was more,
you're
you
alone.
know,
You're not used to being alone.
and there was nobody that I could actually physically be around. And so he'd come by the house and be, and hang out, but he, on the guise if he was there to see his kid. He didn't hang out with the kid. He hung out with me. And I finally started realizing that. And turns
Yep.
out he had a girlfriend the whole time. Turns out, that he was just playing us both. And I found all that out afterwards. I mean, he had girlfriends the whole time we were married, but it was just more of
Hindsight's 2020.
it is. And I finally was just like, what kept me gone was, finally being able to, like feel, because I had gone very, very silent at the end of our relationship. I think I shared with you earlier that
Right.
the last 2 or 3 years of my relationship, I hardly spoke to anybody, let alone
Mm,
him. Like, I was finally able to just express and be, and the more I got that, and the more, even though it was hard as hell when I first started with my nervous system and everything, the more every single day that it was like, I can remember, um you know sometimes a good day was defined as I got out of bed,
yeah.
and that was it. I
Yeah.
got out of bed today. And just diving into really going, what is it that I want? What is it that I need? And asking myself that over and over and over again, even though sometimes the answer was, I just want him back. And then
Hmm.
I would force myself to remember the last time he beat me, or I would force myself to remember some of the stuff he did to the kiddo. And I'd be like, nope, I don't want to remember it. And I'm not going to lie to myself anymore and pretend that that stuff didn't happen. And that was
Yep.
really, staying in that space was how I stayed gone, how I kept him gone. And now, like, I haven't talked to him in over a year. He's just gone.
Yeah. And that's a very lucky, very special case sometimes because they don't want to let go of that control. Like my ex is not, he says he's interested in being a parent, but he is not good at one. He doesn't want to play by the rules. He just wants to control. And that's sometimes where they will hold on to you. But I think the point of you saying, once you woke up to the fact that he was playing you and like you held on to the negative, which some people are like, just you don't want to hold on to the negative. But I'm like, that's the reality. Like if I hadn't held on to my negative, I would have gone back again. And one thing my dad told me, which hit me hard, but like sometimes you need those hard truths when you're in that to wake you up to the fact. He's like, you could have died. He
Mhm.
grabbed, like, because whenever we had, it wasn't amicable. It was like everything boiled over. I think I mentioned that to you. But he grabbed a laundry detergent bottle and beat me in the back of the head and everything and like all this stuff. And my dad was like, he could have grabbed a weight. If you were in a different room, if you were in the living room, that we had weights in the house for lifting and stuff. He's like, he grabbed whatever he could grab and he wasn't going to think twice about what he did
Mm.
to you. He's like, you can't do, like, you have to think about your kid in that. Well, at least that's how I found my strength. I was like, I have to think about my kid, not
Yep.
being the next target of that. So you have to hold on to that negative almost.
Well, and that was the thing. So my ex, like, I can remember, I mean, he beat me when I was pregnant, and he would tell me, yeah, yeah, it never stopped. It never stopped. Um, and he would tell me things like, he would actually tell me, I won't beat the kid until he's ready. He's like, I'd never do this to my kid because it was done to me. But when he's ready, I'm going to man him up. He was 10 when I left. And I just started noticing little behaviors. Like he had stopped beating me, but then I noticed that he was getting more aggressive towards our son. And I was like, no,
Mm,
I'm not going to I mean, there's a couple of incidences. There was one in particular where he was actually going to go after the kid. And kiddo was 6 or 7 at the time. Um, And I was like, no. And I did what I had to do and turned it towards me. And he pulled me into the other room. And that was actually one of the worst beatings I ever took. But he was beaten as a child, and that man could cause more pain without leaving a bruise than
uh,
anything. And a lot of it, I say the physical pain, okay, my body remembers the physical pain, but the bruises heal. But the things that he would say while
yeah.
beating me, that was some of the harder stuff that I've had to actually move through. Is
Mm-hmm.
the mental emotional pain that was caused. Just that reinforcement of
Yep.
I'm not a good human, and this is happening because I'm bad, and that type of
Yep.
thing has been more of my healing journey around the mental emotional than, you know, yes, I have physical ramifications. I have a broken tailbone, so I deal with pain all of the time. I have, a lot of weird, I think probably an autoimmune response. I'm getting ready to go to a new doctor that there's just things going on but all that can heal. And even the mental
Yes.
emotional stuff heals too. Like we find ways to heal that as well.
Yeah. And we talked about this because Megan and I had chatted yesterday for her
Mm-hmm.
podcast. So we're referring to our conversation from yesterday
Yeah.
of I think that's such a good point. It's easier to heal. Like your bruises heal. You move on from those. They're easier to forget, but it's the triggers that we talked about yesterday that
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to trigger you sometimes. And sometimes you don't realize how it's going to come up. So what are some of those things that you've discovered in your journey to get out as you've healed?
Um, yeah. So I'm in a new relationship now. And it's interesting that I actually often encourage people, even if it's a friendship, and they're like, I don't want to be in a
Yeah.
romantic relationship. That's okay. Relationship
Yep.
wounds cannot heal without a relationship. You cannot heal the
Yep.
things that happen to you without some type of relationship involved. There are things that come up that I would never have known. My partner, when we first got together, he would trigger me on the daily, and not intentionally. He was not abusing me in any way. It would be
Oh
little
yeah.
things, and I can't even tell you some of them that I would just, but I didn't. What happened was because he was triggering me, but he was a safe human, and he would realize it after the fact, because I'd be like, okay, so the reason that I went quiet was I was triggered. And so then he started seeing it, and we'd be in conversations, and I would just get really
Mm-hmm.
shut down. And all of a sudden he'd be like, oh, baby, I triggered you. Okay. Okay. What do you need? And it was me being able to communicate after the fact, because again, there are 10,000 things that triggered me that don't trigger me anymore. because I was
Yeah.
in a relationship with a safe human that was like, I see, oh, wait, there's all your physical signs, you're triggered. Because we don't, again, if you're not in a relationship and you get triggered when you're on your own, you don't necessarily know it as a trigger. But when
Yeah.
you're in a
It's really
relationship,
different.
it's totally different. You see that it's
Yeah.
happening. And again, most of the time I would tell him the next day or a few days later, okay, so the other day when I couldn't talk to you, it wasn't because I was shutting down. It wasn't because I was ignoring you. I physically had no
Mhm.
voice.
Yeah.
I'm a very articulate human. You can tell when I get triggered,
Yep, I
I
do the same.
lose my words. I literally lose words. I'm like, things are going on here, but nothing's
Not
coming out.
I
And
get
that
tense,
is,
like really tense.
yep,
Yep.
it's a body thing. We close our bodies up, especially if you've been physically abused, but even mental emotional abuse. I lose my voice. A
Mhm.
lot of people say that they lose their voice. I get really like, I'll start picking my nails. That's one he noticed. And that's the thing about having someone on the outside going, okay, you're doing the things. I'm not telling you to stop doing the things, but I see it. So
Right.
tell me what's going on in your brain right now so we can work through. And one of the biggest things that has helped me, and it can hopefully help the audience listening, is being able to communicate what's going on here isn't real. And I know that it's not real. But if I
Yeah.
say, and I often start the conversation with, so I have a head story going on,
That's a
and
good one. That's a good
my
one.
partner's the archetype, but it's not, he's not abusing me, but I have a head story. And then it becomes
Mhm.
my partner and I against the head story instead of my partner and I against each other. And we're
That's
battling the
so good.
story. And
That's
that's
so
helped
good.
us. Because it's, again, relationship wounds can, parental relationship wounds can't heal without a relationship. A romantic
Oh,
relationship,
yeah.
friendships, you have to have that outside input to, and in a safe way. And then people ask me this all the time
It's
too.
all about
Well, how
communicating. Like you
it,
just said, it's you communicating to them, this is my needs, this is what I'm feeling, this is my reflection, because sometimes it
mhm.
does take a couple days to process it. You can't do that with yourself. You can, but it's different. It's not the same.
Well, and we often, one of the hallmarks of being a survivor is that we beat ourselves up. We blame
Oh,
ourselves,
yeah.
we beat ourselves, we punish ourselves. That's, we were trained that way a lot, most of the time from childhood, from the experiences we had as children, that is how we cope. So if you are by yourself, you will continue to repeat that pattern forever.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
partner tells me all the time, baby, why are you punishing yourself? You didn't do anything wrong. Why are you saying I'm
Mhm.
sorry? And I don't
I
even
do
realize I'm
that
doing
all
it.
the time.
See? Yep.
I do that all the time. I'm
Yep.
like, I'll be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and like everyone's like, "For what?" And I would just think because I deserve to have that happen, or I would even with like I recently figured out that I have because of my ADHD. RSD, which is rejection sensitivity disorder. So like I'm
Yep.
super sensitive to negative things when people don't mean it in a mean way. I just take it so much worse in my
Yep.
head. So you can't
Yep.
work through that by yourself.
You can't. And I think, yesterday you talked about, but it's one of the things is get yourself a support system that is trauma informed, whether it be a group of
Yeah.
survivors. Survivors understand things inherently that you don't have to say. You can say,
Yep.
hey, today's a grief day, and every survivor knows what you mean. It's a grief day. We're not grieving someone dying. It's the same kind of grief. We're grieving
Yep.
something. Trauma informed coaches, trauma informed therapists. One of the things I give the caveat to people when you're looking for someone who's trauma informed, ask them the questions: what modalities do you use? What kind of methodologies? And please share with me the trauma that you have experienced and how you worked through it, doing the things that you're going to help me. Because there are people who
Mm-hmm.
say, and unintentionally, they're survivors and they go, I'm trauma informed. Experiencing it is not trauma informed. There's actual training that
Yep.
people can go through, because sadly, well-intentioned survivors often re-trigger, re-wound other survivors, because the way I heal my trauma is not necessarily the way that everyone heals their trauma.
No.
So be mindful when you're seeking out people to help you. Just ask them, be willing to ask them questions. And anybody who's in any kind of training is going to tell you, oh, here's the training I've had. Here's my personal experiences. Here's how this training helped me. And here's why I do it. Like my personal therapist,
Mhm.
that's how I finally found someone who was trauma informed. Like, was like, no, I've actually
Yeah,
had specific training to work with someone like you. So, yeah.
right. And there's a lot of people like that was something I struggled with when I started my business journey was just I didn't realize how much it would impact me working with someone who wasn't trauma informed, like coaches to help me. I was like,
Yep.
it's not going to affect my business. It's not going to affect my growth, but it does. And you do need someone who's going to help you with those strategies that
Yes.
are trauma informed because like we
Yes.
talked about yesterday, you're not going to show up the same. You can't show up the same and you are you don't know what like going back to the trigger thing, you're not going to know when you're triggered, how to be like you need someone who, like you said, can be there on a grief day or when you're spiraling in your own head or beating yourself
Hmm.
up. You need someone who understands that.
Yep.
Um, so I think that's a really, really good point
Yeah.
to bring up because if you're listening, then it's good questions to ask that some people don't
Yeah.
talk about enough at all.
No, and I think the thing about healing that I also always talk about is a journey, not a destination. The
Yeah,
foundations of what, take a baby step. And I could, like I said, my good days used to be getting out of bed. My good days today are defined totally different because I have more capacity. And just
right.
going, just what's my capacity?
Yeah,
Today I need to sleep. Okay, then sleep. And always just recognizing, okay, a year from now, something else that I can't even see is going to come up because, and it also has to do with the way that our brains are beautiful. They protect us in so many beautiful ways. And when you start healing, you pull those protections off and then it comes up. And it comes up when you're
yeah,
ready and capable to heal and work through it and move through it. Yeah. And you just, you go back to the foundations of, like I said, oh, I'm back to getting out of bed is a good day. That's okay. You're not taking a step backwards just because something new came up and we start over. It's not backwards.
right.
It's all part of it.
Growth.
Yeah. And having those people around you that understand it so you can lean on them in those times to be like, I don't understand why I can't function like I could 2 days ago. And they're going to,
Mhm.
okay, tell me what happened, what triggered you, what came up. And then you start talking and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize, like you said, I didn't realize that my trauma showed up yesterday. Oh, it did. Okay, let's work through that. It's just different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, it's gonna look different for everybody because we're all at different stages too. And one question like this isn't directly related, but you brought it up earlier, and I think I would love to touch on, you know, I think a big thing that survivors and victims go through is just knowing when it's time to leave and it like
Ah,
accepting that it's happening. So I would love to hear like your aha kind of like
sure.
because you won't leave until you've accepted it or acknowledge it that it's a problem.
So I had two kind of aha moments. One happened in March of 2018, and it happened. I was working for a narcissist at the time. So I was surrounded by narcissists, and I was
Oh
standing there
God.
and I was commiserating, which is kind of where we are when we're in the victim mode. I was literally screaming about the boss to a coworker. I have to tell you, this coworker was about 15 years younger than me. I was in my late 30s. She was in her early 20s. And I was
Yeah.
screaming and screaming. And why won't he change it? If he just changed, everything would be good. And all of a sudden, for the literally the first time in my life, I remember hearing the teeny tiny voice in the back of my head, which is actually me, going, and it was they, are never going to change, but you can. That was it. That was a whole thing. And literally, this calm came over me. I stopped screaming at her. I apologized. I said, I shouldn't be doing this with you. I need to have a conversation with him. I'm really sorry. Repaired that relationship. And that was March of 2018. No, December 23rd of 2018. Um, Oddly enough, it was a high school boyfriend reached out through LinkedIn. Don't even know why this was the thing. I can't even tell you why. It was like I hadn't talked to him in 20 some odd years. Like it, you know, the relationship had long since ended. He was in his third marriage. I don't know. It was a hot mess. He was a hot mess, just seeking some connection in life. And as often I find happen, the universe plops old people back in your lap and says, "You used to say you wanted this. Do you still?" He literally contacted me through LinkedIn. I can still see it. I was standing in the kitchen and I looked at my phone and I'm like, LinkedIn, who's messaging me on LinkedIn? I opened it up and I fell to the floor. Had nothing to do with the human, but my body,
Mhm.
everything about me was like, and literally for the first time at that point, it was, 16 years into the relationship, for the first time, my brain went, I want a divorce and I'm done.
Mm.
And everybody's catalytic moment is different. It
Oh
really,
yeah.
really is. But when you hear that, and that was the thing, was I just, for whatever reason, that was the first time I'd really, again, I'd heard my own voice say, I want a divorce and I'm done. And it became my mantra. And I wouldn't let it go. I said, I want a divorce and I'm done.
Very
I
good.
want it. And that was the thing. I held on to that. No matter what he
Mhm.
did, no matter what he said, no matter what gifts he purchased, no matter what was happening,
Oh yeah.
I want a divorce and I'm done. I want a divorce and I'm done. And I just held on to that as a mantra. And that was just kept moving me forward. And yeah. And so, but, and I do also caution people, when those people come up from your past, no, 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 don't go back to them. That's just the universe
Yeah.
saying, at some point, someone was good to you. Here they are again. Trust me, hot
Don't
mess
go
human
back.
being. I don't go back. Or
Don't go
it's
back.
it's that yeah, I'm old, I'm aging myself here, but Garth Brooks song about sometimes the best things are the things you never got. Yeah, like, don't go back.
I guess I have to say for a caveat for me, because like a lot of my listeners know, Zach and I, we dated in college when I was in college. We
Yeah,
just broke it off pretty amicably. Nothing was wrong. We just, we're both not ready for relationships. That's when I met my abuser, like months after that.
totally
And
different. Yeah.
after that, we reconnected. But like screen yourself first and make sure it's not a bad person to go back to. Like, was this person actually toxic? Because I had a lot of toxic people that I'd be like,
Yes.
no.
Yeah, because that's, and well, it was super interesting after that. He wasn't the only one. Like literally all of the past men in my life started showing up. I'm like, I could do a whole podcast episode on past people showing up and me trying to make it work and be like, oh, no, you're just as bad as my ex. Like, oh, why did I
Yep.
ever want you?
Yeah, because you haven't healed yet. You haven't you don't want that.
Nope.
You want someone for the person you want to become.
But that was part of it, was because I had to wade through all the old ones and go, no, not you, not you. I want something totally, totally, totally different. And now my fiance showed up and I'm like, you are nothing like anybody I've ever been with. And that was where it was like, oh, this is the type of human I should be with. And this is the type of human who actually is going to help me heal and really, really love me. Like I'd never, ever been loved before. And seeing it for the first time was like, oh, now I have something. I'm comparing it to all of the old stuff that showed up. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want it. I don't need it. This is what I want. So
Yeah. And I'm sure there was learning curves with that as well. You know,
yeah.
it's like not a trial and error, but you do have to get some like because you are learning to trust other people again. So it's kind of like putting your toe in the water and kind of like learning to swim again. I like it to compare it to. So can
Yes.
you kind of discuss about opening up in that sense?
So what I'm going to share with you is it's not learning to trust other people again. It's learning to trust yourself for the first time.
Yep.
I never trusted me from little bitty,
Yeah.
bitty, bitty. I never trusted me because anything I wanted was, all the boundaries were smashed. I was always told what you want doesn't matter. So I couldn't trust me. So it's really, is my picker broken? Am I the problem? And in some regards, yes, you're the problem. But the problem isn't that you're a bad human. In fact, that you're a really, really good human. The problem is that you don't trust yourself enough to go, I don't want that. Please go away. And trust that that will
Yeah.
go away. And leaning into,
That's such a
uh,
good point.
I still, I mean, I've been with my current partner for 2 years and I still struggle. And I'm sure that we will for a few years. But when I'm struggling against trusting myself, here's how I know that I can trust the relationship. He doesn't take it personal. He doesn't scream and
Mhm.
yell at me and gaslight me. He doesn't go, what is wrong with you? Why don't you trust me?
Yeah.
He'll forget to wear his wedding, or his wedding ring sometimes because we both bought wedding rings and he wears it now, even though we're getting married in a month. And he'll go out and he won't wear it. And that's like a trust issue. I'm like, why did you go out and not wear your wedding ring? And he doesn't come back and go, well, why don't you trust me? He comes back and goes, it's a little hurtful that you think that I did that on purpose. Let's talk about it. Oh, I, I wasn't trying to hurt you with oh, wait. He helps me see my toxic side without throwing it back in my face. He goes,
Right.
okay, I'm a human too. This is a give and a give.
Yep.
Um, and that constant reminder of, and he does little things like, um, when he sees that I need it, he'll just randomly out of the blue, we'll be snuggling in the morning and he's like, you're amazing. Have I
Oh.
told you how proud I am of all the things that you do? And he just constantly is doing that, reinforcing without me having to, when you're with your abuser, you were constantly going, please, 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 just tell me I'm good. And they
Yeah.
wouldn't. And they would for a little tiny bit post
Yep.
abuse, and then they'd go right back to it. And
Mhm.
the one thing I can tell people is when you get in relationships with the right person, as a survivor, you're going to test it and test it and test it and test it and it make it ugly. And I've gotten ugly. And you may think you've ruined it. And I have not even come close to ruining it. And when it gets ugly, that other human goes, you're ugly. And I still love you. And it's okay. And we're going to work through it. But that,
Mhm.
you're not allowed to do that. That's not okay. And that is
Yeah.
actually that boundary setting from the other perspective so that I don't have to be like, oh, okay, so I have ugly parts. That's okay. I'm human. I have toxic
Yes,
things. I'm human.
that's such a good, like, I just want to frame that for the audience, that how you said that, like, it's, you are human, you have ugly parts, and it's okay to have problems, and you can change whatever it is those problems are. Because, like, I feel like so many
Yeah.
of us have abusers that they make us they make us take on those problems as our identity.
Yes.
And they are like, "You're never gonna change, you're always like this." Because mine used to say, "You want the drama, you crave it, you make the problems, you are the problem, like, you're not a good woman," type of thing, "You're not a good
Yeah.
partner." So I think accepting our issues and learning
Yep.
to change from them instead of taking them so personally.
Mm. Well, and my current partner tells me that. He goes, you're addicted to the drama. You create the drama. But he says it in a way that's not throwing it back on my face. Like, you create the drama, you're the problem. Stop it. He throws it back up. He
Yeah.
doesn't throw it. He says, you're addicted to the drama. You create the drama. And I have noticed so much growth and so much change. That's why I stay. He says that to me all the time. Because I'm like, why do you stay if I'm a dramatic human being? He's like, because you are actively recognizing it. And we're having this conversation. You're asking what you can do better. Like, you're
Yeah.
in the conversation. You're making the efforts. Yes, you're addicted to drama. And again, a whole other podcast we could talk about that we actually are addicted to it. It's actually a physical addiction. But
Yeah.
that doesn't make you a bad human. That's just part of the healing. And having that human reflect it back and go, drama, not what this relationship's about. You don't have to be doing this. Let's work
Mhm.
through it together. It's a very different experience to have.
And I think that's a good, like, I relate to the drama piece. We've never had that conversation out loud, but I've had it in my own head where I did
Mhm.
realize, okay, that's me trying to test to see if they're going to leave. Or I
Yep.
only knew that growing up was the chaos and the yelling so if you come from that home, that's maybe how you should, like, for me, that was how I communicated with my dad. It was
Yep.
yelling and chaos, and
Yep.
you would just go on and act like nothing happened. And it was an unspoken thing, but not everyone um communicates like that, and it's actually not
That's right.
healthy.
It's not. And that's the thing is people have asked me before, how do you know when you're in a healthy relationship? You'll know.
Oh, you'll
You'll know.
know.
It's going to be everything you never had before, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to feel like you're going to run, and they're going to look at you and go, nope, you're good. You're safe. You're seen. You're heard. You're loved. You'll know. You know.
You'll know.
Yep.
I think the point that you said earlier too is they're not going to be throwing stuff back in your face. They're going to want to make you, the one thing that I've noticed in a healthy relationship is they want to make you better. They want to grow with you. You
Yep.
have shared goals and visions, because
Yep.
usually that's where a lot of the issues are. And they're not going to
Yep.
hold finances over your head, because that's obviously the number one leading cause of divorce is finance.
Yep.
So can you talk to this person about finances openly and
Mhm.
comfortably? So, and that goes back to communication. How
Yeah.
are they communicating with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, that's just healing is possible, leaving is possible, staying gone is possible, co-parenting with them is possible. It's all
Yeah.
possible. And you just have to find whatever it is to get you to stay gone. That's the first trick, is staying out of it. Because
Yeah,
once you stay out of it and don't go back into another relationship like it, everything changes. Everything.
it does.
Yeah.
And I loved all of these. I feel like we could keep talking
Yes.
forever about this.
Yeah,
So I
probably.
would love to wrap it up a little bit, just so
Yep.
because you have other things on your agenda today. And
Yes.
I would just like to know, what is one key takeaway? Because I know we covered a lot, and you
Absolutely.
just said that all so beautifully. But is there any other point or lesson takeaway you'd like the audience to walk away with as we wrap up?
I think it's the same thing I tell every survivor, whether I meet them in person or in a Facebook group. You are worth love. You are love, and you
Mhm.
are worth being loved. And if nothing else gets you through, you deserve that. Everybody does.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And if anyone wants to connect with you, follow you, we're gonna have it in the show notes, but
Yep.
let's just say it right here for them now.
It's super easy to find me everywhere. My handle on every social media is at Flow Rising and the number one. So at Flow Rising one. Um, you can find me on every social media, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I'm there under that handle everywhere. So it's easy to find me, find the show. You can search Flow Rising and you'll find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope that you have an amazing day, and remember that you do deserve to be loved, and you deserve to have a life that you're not just surviving the day to day, but actually living your life and enjoying. So thank you.